I'm here talking to Misha from Periphery.
What's up?
And Mikko, aka Clark Kent, aka ML Sound Labs.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Awesome. So we're going to be talking about the new cab pack that these guys worked on together, and I wanted to start by asking, at this point, Misha, you've achieved a level of fame that you could use pretty much any guitar gear that you want to use, but if I recall correctly, you've used the Axe effects from basically the beginning of your career. Can you talk about what's gone into making that choice?
Yeah, so I haven't used the Axe effects from the beginning of my career. It may seem that way, but I actually used amps for a little bit, and I always had a bit of an idea of what I wanted to get tonally. And I actually do love amps. I love them to death. But I found that with what I wanted to go for with Periphery, it was really difficult to get what I wanted. And I was always using a lot of outboard effects and a lot of just basically things that would kind of change the amp in a way that it's kind of doing stuff that maybe it wasn't really designed to do, or that was kind of missing the point. And with something like the Axe effects, I found that I could get what I wanted in a tiny little box, relatively speaking, that weighs nothing, that I can take around the world if I were to tour with it and fly with it, and it's just as effective for recording as it is for live use, and it's endlessly tweakable, and there's something about the sound itself that, as realistic as it is, I think it's almost a bit more refined than a real amp. It's less raw. And that was very much in line with what I was basically trying to coax out of the real life amps. So it was just kind of this thing that worked out really well for me to sort of find and develop my tone. And because of that, even though I absolutely love amps to death and I have a ton of them, I just find it very difficult, especially when it comes to Periphery, to use anything other than the Axe effects.
Gotcha. And so at some point you became aware of Mikko's cab packs. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I've been messing with a lot of IRs, especially once you're in the Axe effects world and the software sim world. You're always looking at that stuff, and I've been really picky with IRs. Even the ones that have been shipping with the Axe effects for a while, like I always felt like they had characteristics that I like, but two of the things I thought were very, very difficult for a lot of, the cab companies to capture with a realistic low end that wasn't overbearing or, high pass, like way too far. And the same thing with the top end is I felt like a lot of them were either really had like really weird notchy top frequency, or had the other thing where they were just rolled off, kind of hide that. And when I started talking to Mikko, because he told me that he was shooting cabs, and I hadn't really checked them out, and I figured I'd give them a shot and see what was up. But when I actually tried them out, I was like, wow, these are really, really well done. And they they seem to be done from that perspective where they were addressing those two issues that I had. So from there, I was sold. I was like, this guy totally gets it. He totally gets what my problem has been with so many of these IRs, at least to my tastes. And it seemed like these were also very playable, because the IR can really affect the feel. But I felt like these ones were actually very, very pleasing to jam on and to play on. They weren't solely just for recording or reamping.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah.
So eventually you guys collaborated. What was that process like for you guys?
Well, I mean, basically it was, we started talking because, Mikko's shooting these awesome cabs, and I think he told me that he just shot the Mesa oversized one, which is such a classic cab, and it's kind of one of those things that I knew that I would love. And I heard the various cabs, the various impulses that he shot, and we just started talking about, like, what if I mixed these, and if I could get something good. And I was a bit apprehensive because I was like, I don't really know if I'll be able to do a good job with it. So I told him, look, like, we'll try it out, and if I like it, then we'll go for it, and if I don't, then no hard feelings. But not only did I enjoy it, and not only did I found it very easy to work with and kind of use the different impulses to get the bits of character that I wanted in my sort of overall cab sound. But I ended up with stuff that was so good that I just ended up using it as my main cab sound, and that's kind of the test right there, was like this basically beat out all the other impulses that I'd been using in the past. So just for that alone, it was worth it, because like I feel like my guitar tone kind of got a lot better, especially in the context of a mix.
And then Mikko, what was the process like from your end?
It was really easy for me. Misha is such a nice guy, and whenever I do these cabs, obviously at first I didn't even know that Misha was going to collaborate with me on this. So when I shot it, it was supposed to be just another cab pack release from me. But then when we started talking with Misha, I assumed that he'd be interested in this cab because they used this cab in the studio for the Periphery album. So Misha just, he's a cool dude, and he creates awesome tones. And when he created the mixes, they automatically became some of the best IRs in that pack. So it was really just an easy experience for me.
That's great. And so talking about the IRs, I know there's been a lot of discussion on the Fractal forum about shooting them, and even predating your Axe Effects days, I saw videos where you expressly talked about how the IR is the key component to the guitar tone and how it ultimately sounds. And my understanding is that you eventually built a robot or something to create exacting and repeatable results. What was that like? I mean, can you tell us about that?
Sure. Obviously, when shooting IRs, the mic position is everything. That's key. Something like building a robot might sound crazy, but when you're doing it as a profession, miking up cabs, just think about it. If you move the mic and then you go to the control room to listen to the sound, if it's good or not, then you go back to the live room and move the mic, it's just crazy. It's so much work. So I noticed early on that I just need a microphone robot that I can control from the room, control room, and just listen and fine tune the positions. It's such a time saver, and actually more than a time saver, I find these positions that I would never even try on the cab. When I go into the live room and see where the mic actually is, it's like, whoa, I would have never placed the mic there, but it works and it sounds amazing.
So yeah, the robot going by ear.
Yeah, definitely. And I always have a mix running. I have like a pop mix with a cleanish sound, then a slightly driven, and then a metal clip going in live situation, so that when I change the microphone position, I can hear it doubled in a mix. So I always hear how it will sound in a mix in the end, and that's it's a really hard project to run, but they sound really good as a result, so it's only a good thing. And obviously I came up with the technique to use a tube power amp. I used the Mesa Mark IV head for most of the IRs that I've shot, but then removing the power amp collar, which is now called Mic Plus DI from the Fractal Audio, and you can do it with the Axe Effects also. So that's one of the capture process moves that I do, and I think that just gives you the most authentic sound you can get out from IR. Obviously there's a lot of going on, like I remove every color that's in there except for the mic and the signal it's capturing. So when you plug an XLR cable to the Axe Effects, and if you use an SM57 IR of mine, it'll be the same thing as plugging a cable into the mic and miking the cab. It should be really authentic and sound just like the real thing. So in that way, I feel like my IRs are a great extension to the Axe Effects itself.
So the impetus of this conversation here is that you guys have collaborated again, this time on a Citrus and Angle cab pack. Is that correct?
No, that's Angle.
Angle. Okay, thank you. So how did this one come about?
Well, obviously, I'm not sure if Periphery fans will remember it, but Misha has been using the Citrus based on Orange 4x12 cab in the past. And true Periphery fans will know that the IR used for the original album was the metal 4x12 IR from from the Generation 1, right? Is that correct, Misha?
Yep, that's exactly correct. You have very astute.
So that IR is also based on an angle. So it's kind of a throwback to periphery tones in general, and obviously they don't sound just like them. I hope they sound even better.
So, like, an interesting comment on this is, the Mesa cab. It's interesting because these three cabs, like, they're all things that actually work in different ways when you're recording or in the room. Like, there's such different contexts. Like that Mesa cab, I'm not crazy about it as a live cab, but for miking it up, I don't know, it's just magical, you know? I always really liked the way that the citrus stuff sounded in the room, but I actually told Mikko I was like a bit worried because I've never gotten great results from miking that up. And as far as actually miking up an angle cab, I'd never done that either. I'd only just played that in the room, but I liked the sound. It was kind of scoop, and it had kind of a bit of an off-axis phasey quality, which I thought was really cool. So again, I told him I went in apprehensively because I was like, look, like I'm not entirely sure how I feel about doing this, but let's give it a shot and let's see what happens.
And my understanding is that you've already used these IRs in some recordings.
Yeah, so the mixes that I made with them. Well, first off, I should say Mikko's captures were absolutely awesome. The citrus cab is very present in the mid-range as I was expecting, but it's not boxy like, and that's generally the problem I had was it's really like boxy character. It was kind of too much. But I guess since he's using his ear, I don't know his crazy techniques, but he managed to get that character out of it without making it kind of unusable. So that was really cool. And then the angle cab does translate with that off-axis sound, and I really like that. That's something that I like, and I kind of battle with a little bit. I'll usually kind of mess with post EQ, trying to recreate a little bit of it. Where you kind of get like that smoother dip in like the 4 or 5K range. But if it's not right, it kind of neuters your sound. It kind of doesn't work in the mix. But I found some ones that just really like rode that line very well. And blending the two cabs together also had some really cool results. So actually, Cab Pack 8 from the old one was pretty much my go-to. That was like my magic cab. But I think right now I'm pretty stuck on Angle 1 and Angle 2. Like those are pretty much my go-to ones these days because there's something really just kind of right about how it's nailing that slightly off-axis phasey sound, but still sounding very full and not kind of taking away from the character.
Yeah, and I said that the most important part is the microphone position, but that was not actually correct. Obviously, the cab that you're shooting is the most important part. And if it sounds bad, it will sound bad no matter how you mic that cab. So I was fortunate enough to find this orange 4x12 that this cab pack is based on. That has the early selections, because nowadays if you buy a new orange cab, it will have the Chinese selections. So I managed to find one of the early ones that have the better selections in it. And also the angle cab is the same physical dimensions as the Mesa Boogie traditional 4x12 cab. And the main difference here is that it has a metal grille, so that's adding some spark to the presence area, and the speakers are front-loaded vintage 30s, so it's a little bit of a different sound, but you can definitely hear the similarities to Cab Pack 7 that I did, which is based on the Mesa traditional 4x12. But this is way meaner sounding. I think this is the main cab, the angle to be used for chugs, like for the metal riffage and stuff like that. I think that's the go-to cab for most people.
So I think one of the questions that I have, and that maybe a lot of the users are going to have, is does this new cab pack that you guys are putting out, does this make the original bulb cab pack obsolete?
In my opinion, no. It's just different flavors. And if I had to kind of boil it down, I would say the Angle is probably the most scooped of them. The Mesa one is the most balanced, and the Citrus is the most mid-forward. And that's just kind of, breaking it down to its simplest character, but it's a bit more complex than that, especially with the various mixes. But I think it's just kind of completing different, different parts of the range. It's kind of, rather than just kind of doing another cab that's very similar. Because this is, again, as I can't say this enough, I think people really underestimate how much of a difference a cab makes, both in real life or IRs or whatever. I see people obsess over what brand preamp tube they put in their amp, like as if it's going to make this massive difference that they replace the first 12AX7 in their amp, and it's like, dude, change the cab, it will change everything,
Yeah.
So it's kind of, in my mind, it's kind of just running the gamut of that whole range of really how your whole EQ curve sounds. So I think with all three cabs, you're pretty well covered as far as like aggressive 412s go.
Capac 13 is somewhere in between the Citrus and Angle cabs that I created. The Angle is more aggressive, and then again, the Citrus is something that can be used for many, even rock type of sounds, because it has so much middles and it sounds juicy, and everyone knows the Citrus brand pretty well, probably.
Right, and I wanted to ask, because both of you guys are pretty well respected for your production skills and the tones that you dial in. Can you pass on like maybe some of the tips that you guys have about how you dial in the sounds, maybe some go-to amps that you guys use?
Well, personally, I'm just talking about the Axe-Fx amp sims, and I think the Friedmans are the best amps for me. Like, I don't even have to touch the EQ most of the time. I just leave them at noon. Same goes for the 5153. Obviously, those are high gain amps, all of those. But obviously, that's what I use most of the time. Obviously, the Mesa amp sims, since I'm a Mesa guy, I've owned like 20 different Mesa amps for real. So those are really important for me, but they are a bit harder to tweak. So I usually tend to go with the Friedman HBE. That's my go-to. And for clean sounds, I might use the Fenders, but the Lone Star Clean is where it's at for me.
And do you feel that those go really well with this new cab pack that you guys put out?
Well, definitely. Obviously, everyone has a different guitar. Everyone has different pickups and picking styles, and they react differently to different amp sims. So I cannot give you something that will work for you automatically. But the way I shoot the IRs is that they are really balanced, and I think those amp sims are balanced as well, so they should work together perfectly.
As for me, actually a lot of those are the same for me. I think we have very similar tastes. I actually owned a few Mesas. I'm less of a Mesa guy just because that stuff requires quite a bit of tweaking to get it where I need it for stuff like Periphery. But I actually own the real life counterparts of the Friedman, the BE100 is the real one. I have the EVH 5150, 100, and 50 watt, both of which I like on the Axe-Fx as well. And also you just can't go wrong with a PV 5150 or 6505. Like that's just one of the classic metal amps. And the PVH 6160 is absolutely awesome. Again, like the Axe-Fx doesn't necessarily sound exactly like the real thing, and in some ways I actually think it's better. Actually in a lot of ways I think it's kind of cool, but the main thing is that the character of each amp totally makes it through. And as Mikko said, like, you really don't need to do very much. So my patches are probably going to be very disappointing, and those of you who have seen the ones I put up on AxeShade, they're deceivingly simple. I just try to keep the gain sort of as low as I can get away with while still getting the saturation that I need. But there's no crazy EQing or anything going on, because I like very balanced amps, and I feel like if you have a balanced amp and a balanced cab, you can kind of let your hands do the talking. So it just gives you sort of a blank slate to work with that has the character that you like. I recently reamped, well, actually, the Haunted Shores EP that we just did, the Victory EP, reamped. And I think I used, for all the reamping, I think I used Cab 8, because we didn't have these cabs were being prototyped still. But I used the Cab 8 from the old pack, and that one worked really well with all of the real life counterparts of those amps, and this Driftwood Mini Nightmare amp that I have as well. So yeah, I mean, like that's the key. It's like if it can work with real amps and with an Axe FX and just kind of sit in the mix, like what more could you ask for, really?
For sure. So, Mikko, you've been kind enough to provide some demo material, which I'm going to show everybody in a second, and go through some of your patches and everything. But do you guys have any final closing comments that you want to say about the this new cab pack with the citrus and the angle?
I'm not a fan of hyperbole, but I will say this is the best thing that you will ever experience in your whole life. I don't even care if you've never touched a guitar before, or you don't know what an IR is. You will love it. It will make certain parts of your body bigger and more virile, depending on if you're a man or a woman. These are, again, things that I can guarantee. But other than that, they sound really good and they're fun to play. So I really hope that you guys enjoy it.
If you guys have ever heard about porn, this is better.
Yeah. It's definitely better than porn, without a doubt.